welcome to Governing Pandemics 101.
Hello and welcome back to Governing Pandemics 101. I'm Suerie Moon, Professor of Practice here at the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies. Today's mini lecture will be focusing on the development, production, and distribution of vaccines for pandemic contexts. So my lecture will proceed in three stages. First, I'll cover what happened during COVID-19 with vaccines. Next, I'll go more broadly into the issue of how are vaccines generally developed, produced, and distributed for pandemics. And last but not least, what are some of the key proposals and actions that are currently on the table to try to address some of the problems that we found during the pandemic of the last couple of years. So first, let's go back to what happened over the last few years during the pandemic. If you remember back to January of 2020, when we first started getting information about this mysterious new virus coming from China, this is actually when vaccine development began, because this is when Chinese scientists shared genomic sequencing data, which you just heard Professor Birchie speaking about. They shared this information on the international data platform called GISAID, and this allowed vaccine companies as well as diagnostics developers to begin jumping into product development. By the end of 2020, in record time, we had a number of vaccines that were either approved or very close to achieving regulatory approval. This broke all sorts of records for how quickly a vaccine could be developed, and it was a major feat of science and technology. But of course, who actually benefited from those vaccines did not follow as happy a story. So what happened after safe and effective vaccines were developed? Well, if we rewind a few months to the first half of 2020, we knew from previous experience, for example, during the H1N1 influenza outbreak in 2009, that it would be very difficult for all countries in the world to be able to access vaccines. We knew that there would be a rush, that all countries would want to get what they could. And so in response to this fear of what might happen, an initiative was launched called COVAX as part of the ACT Accelerator, the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator. And the point of COVAX was to try to help countries to collaborate so that all countries would be able to get access to some vaccines, especially in those early months when there would not be enough to get around. It was a beautiful idea, but unfortunately, for a number of reasons, all of which we won't go into today, it was not able to deliver on those initial promises. It didn't have the money that it needed. It had been created really in the heat of the moment. And a number of countries did begin to do everything they could to get access to the vaccines. And so what we had was both hoarding of vaccines as well as bans on exports of raw materials and finished products, which made it very difficult for a number of countries around the world to get access to vaccines. And as you can see here in this picture, what we had at the very beginning was a number of high-income countries, and very quickly also upper-middle-income countries were able to begin vaccinating their people quickly in early 2021. Lower-middle-income countries followed suit, but low-income countries have still had a very hard time matching that very rapid coverage. One of the things to note, however, is that compared to at least what happened even just 10 years ago, we've had many, many more countries both developing and producing and exporting vaccines as compared to before. So before, this used to be primarily something that high-income countries were able to do. We had many emerging countries such as China, India, Russia, Cuba, not only manufacturing vaccines, but also developing them, and in some cases transferring the technology to try to expand production to other parts of the world. This is quite different from what we've seen in previous outbreaks. But this is important to recognize because the complexity of what's been happening in terms of who has been developing and producing and exporting vaccines is part of it we have to understand in order to think about how we might reform the system in the future. As I mentioned before, in early 2021, every government, every country wanted to get vaccines, and there simply weren't enough to go around. And a response to this was to try to expand the production, either through the transfer of technology and or through a proposal, for example, to waive intellectual property rights at the World Trade Organization, to waive provisions of what's called the TRIPS agreement. This stands for the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, to waive certain protections to to allow companies around the world to produce drugs, vaccines, and diagnostics faster. Today, in May 2022, as I'm giving this lecture, the proposal that was put forward by South Africa and India has not yet been agreed, and it continues to be under negotiation at the World Trade Organization. In the meantime, you did have quite a number of technology transfer agreements that were struck between vaccine developers and manufacturing companies in order to try to expand supply. As you can see in this diagram, you had many different technology transfer agreements, and you had companies from both high, upper, and lower middle income countries who are very active actually in producing vaccines. And again, this is different from what we've seen in previous outbreaks. But all of this lays the groundwork for some of the ongoing proposals for reform. The last thing I should mention in terms of what happened during COVID-19 is, of course, vaccine hesitancy. So even in countries that had more vaccines than they could use, we had a big challenge actually reaching some of the thresholds of vaccination coverage that we initially hoped would lead to population-wide immunity. So many governments hoped that they could rapidly convince their populations to hit 70, 80, 90% coverage, and we hoped that this would end the pandemic early. In reality, of course, what happened is that many people did not have sufficient trust to come forward to become vaccinated, and indeed we had a hard time getting the pandemic under control. Still today, we're learning every week, every month, new things about the efficacy of these vaccines. The virus continues to evolve. So there's many things that we still don't understand. But of course, we have found that overall the vaccines have been proven to be quite safe and quite effective in preventing serious illness and death from this pandemic. Let me move now to the second part of my lecture. And so I spoke and I provided you with a brief summary of what happened during COVID-19. And as I mentioned before, we had very rapid development of vaccines. I should have mentioned at the beginning actually that today we have over 330 vaccines in development. We have 18 that have received regulatory approval. And again, the number of countries that are able to develop and produce vaccines is much broader than it was before. Historically, the way that vaccine development works for pandemics is quite different from everyday vaccine manufacturing, the kinds of vaccines that we might use for daily childhood immunization campaigns, for example. Because we don't know when a new pathogen will emerge, we don't know what that pathogen will be like, how it will behave, and we may not have any vaccines at all to prevent infection or illness with that pathogen. We generally have to wait until an outbreak happens before we can jump in and begin the vaccine R&D process. What this means is that the whole situation is much too risky for private companies to take on alone. And for this reason, we've historically had a high amount of government involvement in both providing money for research and development of vaccines at the beginning, what we call push funding, in providing incentives and agreeing to purchase vaccines, what we sometimes call a pull incentive, and oftentimes governments actually playing a shepherding role, sort of a matchmaking role, helping companies move as fast as they can to develop vaccines in order to meet the broader public interest. But what you can see is that when it comes to vaccines for pandemics, you have a much stronger role of government, of the public sector, working together with the private sector to ensure that vaccine development and production happens as quickly as possible to respond to an emergency. I should say, again, that historically vaccines have been one of the main technologies, if not the main technology, that countries have relied upon to try to control epidemics. Of course, it's better to prevent an infection or to prevent severe illness, especially when people are panicking about a new illness. It's better to prevent that illness than to have to wait until somebody gets sick and treats them. And so for that reason, a number of the investments and the institutions that have been created have really focused on vaccines, and there actually has been quite a bit of neglect of therapeutics or treatments and diagnostics, which will be the subject of our next session. Today we're going to keep the focus on vaccines. So one of the innovations that has developed over the last few years has been the creation at the international level of an initiative called the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, CEPI, or CEPI. And CEPI was created because we realized that it was not enough to just have one country putting money into developing its own vaccine and providing for its own population. We needed more structured forms of international collaboration, to bring public money together, to invest in R&D of vaccines, also to ensure that all countries would have access to those vaccines in the event of an emergency. CEPI was created in the wake of the 2014 West African Ebola crisis, when we realized that no such institution existed, but the world badly needed one. CEPI's main mandate has been limited to vaccines. This may change in the future, but it again reflects the fact that in the past we have relied very heavily on vaccines rather than on other kinds of technologies to try to control pandemics. CEPI right now is the only international entity that tries to structure international cooperation to pay for that R&D at risk, and a number of questions have been raised as to whether we need other kinds of institutions that play a similar role to ensure that all countries can have access to vaccines in future crises. I should also mention, building on Professor Berchi's lecture just a few moments ago, that we continue to rely on very informal norms and rules to ensure that countries are willing to share pathogen samples, they're willing to share genomic sequencing data in order to allow vaccine development to begin as quickly as possible when a new outbreak emerges. In fact, this is one of the key areas where we really need to pay attention in some of the reform debates that are coming down the pipeline, both because countries have an interest in developing vaccines as quickly as possible, and because all countries have an interest in making sure everybody can have access to those vaccines when needed. So what are some of the proposals and some of the actions that are currently on the table to try to address a number of the weaknesses that we saw in COVID-19. Of course, this pandemic is not yet over, and there is still a big effort to try to ensure there's enough funding for COVAX and that we can continue to ramp up vaccination in the lowest income countries where the coverage rate is very low. There has been a push to replenish the funding for CEPI and to expand the remit of what CEPI does. As I mentioned before, the debate over the proposed waiver of intellectual property rights continues at the World Trade Organization. And the fourth area where there's been a big push is in expanding production capacity. Many more countries realize they do not want to rely on imports. They don't want to rely on other countries to be able to access vaccines in the event of emergency. This is far too important to leave it up to chance. And many countries who went without vaccines or had to wait for vaccines are now investing in building up their national production capacity. But one of the key issues that has not yet been addressed is, even if we have more and more factories around the world in many more countries that can make vaccines, what will we do in the event of a new outbreak when we need to develop a new vaccine? How can we make sure that those factories actually have something to manufacture, that they have access to the technology and the intellectual property that they would need to actually make those vaccines? That's an issue that has not yet been resolved, but has to be addressed in current negotiations for reforms. We also have to find ways to develop what's called the warm base. So when that factory is not operating, when it's not producing for emergencies, of course, it cannot just sit there empty and idle. We need to find ways of keeping those factories running and producing vaccines for everyday use. These are some major issues. I should say that the issue of innovation in vaccines and access to vaccines, production of vaccines, is not covered under the international health regulations. The international health regulations remain essentially silent on this issue. And so this remains an issue that has to be addressed either in the pandemic treaty negotiations or in discussions over the creation of a new fund for pandemic preparedness or in another venue. There are many, many issues that still have to be resolved, including how do we ensure that countries are willing to share samples and genomic sequencing data quickly? How do we bring countries together to pay for research and development at risk in a collaborative way? How do we make sure that all countries can access that technology, that the intellectual property and the knowledge and the technology is shared in an equitable way in the event of an outbreak? How do we address the issue that there is no standing stockpile? We don't have a way of stockpiling or mobilizing funding quickly when we need to ensure that there's enough money to purchase vaccines so that every country in the world can access them. So these are all questions that are currently being debated. There are actually very few concrete proposals on the table as of today in May 2022. But certainly, as you can see, a major issue that has clearly been raised as a priority by many countries, both developing countries and industrialized countries, recognize that this is a matter that has to be resolved if any reforms to global pandemic preparedness and response are to be successful. Thank you very much, and now we'll turn to the quiz questions.